Today's interview is with Logan Freeman. Logan got all the way to be an undrafted agent for the Oakland Raiders, now the Las Vegas Raiders, and then he got cut. And it tells an interesting story about his football career and, you know, eventually why he walked away from that, who eventually got into real estate and is doing big things now in multifamily. So he talks about all of that. Make sure you stick around for all of his really interesting story. He's got a great story, and I really enjoyed hearing that. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate. Go to the WWRE Podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. It really does help me build this platform. So please go ahead and take the 5 minutes that it would take to do that. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate in whatever capacity that is, I'd love to get to know you. Love to see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. So there's going to be a link in the description down below. Please sign up there or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, and there's going to be a sign up page there as well, so you can sign up in either of those places. We can hop on a call and have a great conversation about real estate. But before all that, stick around for today's awesome interview with Logan Freeman. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we have Logan Freeman with us. What's up, Logan?
Man, I am so excited to get in the ring with the one and only Barri Griffiths, baby.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited to have you in the ring as well.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a fun interview. I'm excited about that. But before we kind of jump into it, you want to tell us a little bit more about your background, what you've been up to, what you're currently focused on?
Absolutely. So grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, which is the capital of Missouri. If you were to look at the United States and go right in the middle and then go in the middle of the middle, that's where I'm from, baby. So I grew up, throwing hay on the back of a trailer and sweeping floors and washing dishes. From an early age, just got really ingrained in, work ethic. And, athletics was really important to me growing up. And so, my mom and dad put me into a lot of different sports, and I always thought I was going to be an NBA basketball player. And man, I love basketball to this day. Well, it turns out my body type and loves to put on weight. I love to put on muscle, and which is a good thing, but it also can be a tough thing. And so in high school, man, I was already like 250 pounds, 6'2", 6'2 and a half, 250 pounds. And I was running up and down the basketball courts, and man, my knees really started giving me some trouble. There's this thing called Osgood slaughter. It's right on the front of your knee that whenever you have these tendons that you grow really fast, they don't really keep up. So I had all these knee issues, but long story short, football coach saw me walking down the hallway. He said, man, you've got to come out and play some football. And I had played football in grade school, but man, I was a little bit of a pansy back in the day. I'd get hit in my arms. I'd have all those bruises, and I'd always complain about how bad it hurt. And it's like a precursor to some things in my life. But long story short, I got picked up, I got a scholarship, went to Division II football scholarship, and played at the University of Central Missouri, not far from where I live now. And had a good career and got picked up as an undrafted free agent with the Oakland Raiders. This was back when they were in Oakland. And was out there for camp for a little while and got cut. When I got cut, man, at the NFL Combine, I was 335 pounds. I benched, and we talked about this, but I benched the 225 29 times, and I ran a 5 flat 40. So, I was big, but I also was pretty in shape. And so when I got cut, man, I just stopped eating the same amount of food that I was eating. And I'm sure you can attest to this, but I lost like 35 or 40 pounds in 4 or 5 weeks, just not by eating the same that I was. Well, the San Francisco 49ers called me about the last week of cuts. So if you ever watch Hard Knocks, you know how they always have folks come on and you're sitting down with the coach and you're getting cut or you're staying. Well, it was about the last week of that. I really just needed to show up and try out, and I was probably going to make the practice squad. And I turned him down. I said no. And that was a big decision point in my life. I no longer was going to identify as an athlete. So I went back, finished my master's program at school, started to better myself and understand who I was as a person, start reading books and listening to podcasts and things like that. And, lo and behold, 7 or 8 years later, I'm sitting here now and I'm in the real estate world. But, I've been through a lot through that journey, but that's a little bit about my background and kind of where I come from.
That's really interesting to me. Obviously, all the athletics and sports stuff, it really interests me. And the whole football world is a different world to me, because coming from the UK, football is something completely different, right? To me in the UK,
right.
It's soccer to me. But that whole world of like 18-year-olds who are like 300 pounds, like playing in that front line is just nuts Crazy. To me, because you're so young, but to be so massive. It's just nuts. Like, to be big at that age, were you intentionally, do you just eat a lot, or do you just have, you said your body type just puts on weight, but you must have been eating to fuel that, right? Was it, how was your diet back then to be such a big guy, right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, man, I had to eat probably, I think we talked about this, but 8 to 12,000 calories, depending on the activity I was doing. And it wasn't just bad food. There was some bad food in there, but I mean, it was a lot of whey protein. It was a lot of oatmeal. It was a lot of eggs. And this is kind of a funny story. In college, in my master's program, I had a note from my coach that would allow me to order a pizza to my classroom. And I would eat the pizza in the class. And then I would bring a blender full of Greek yogurt, whey protein, probably 3 or 4 scoops in there, like a half of a bag or a thing of oatmeal. And then I'd blend that up with a bunch of milk, and that was my dessert. So I was eating some crazy amount of food just to keep that weight on, and I would say coming out of high school at 18, I was probably about 265 or 275. And then when I got to college, that's when they really start weight training and kind of honing in on your diet a little bit more. And that's when I kind of beefed up to 335 pounds. But man, I tell you what, it was a task trying to keep that weight on. And now it's a task trying to keep the weight off, Barry.
Because your body's kind of used to that size, I'm sure, right? It's
right.
Your body adapts to that size and it gets a base level. I always say this, like I'm maybe 270 now, and I eat 2 or 3 meals a day. I don't really eat that much anymore, but I stay around that 270, which is amazing, because most people, they would love to be 6'5", 270, right? And you're not carrying too much fat. But I think because my baseline of what my body was used to was around 290, 295, 270 is nothing. It's like, okay, it's comfortable. It's strange how your body adapts to that. And anytime I got an injury and I lost weight and got down, it would always springboard back up pretty quickly. And it's interesting to hear that you had the same thing. But I think eating as well, it's like, people don't understand the dedication. Like people when you see you in shape and you're big and you're strong, they always talk about the gym. Oh, you must train so hard. You must train. Anyone can go to the gym for an hour, and a half, 2 hours a day. That's easy. That's the absolute easy part, right? For me, the eating 7 or 8 meals a day was just the part that was, and people are like, oh, I wish I could eat 7 or 8 meals a day. Or you try eating chicken breast, broccoli, and brown rice 7 or 8 meals a day, all day, every day for 5 or 6 years in a row, like just nonstop. It's not that fun, but it's kind of what got us to where we needed to go, right? And that's a dedication in itself. And I think then once you develop and you go somewhere else, like you talked about, into real estate, into whatever aspect of your life you went to, you have that dedication, right? And I always look back to that time where I had, I would set my alarm, I would get up in the middle of night, drink a protein shake, all that stuff. Having that dedication kind of helps me now to do other stuff now, right? I don't do that. I have that energy that I used to have to do that. I can transfer over into real estate and podcasting and everything else like that. So but it's always interesting because there's not many of us around that has gone kind of through. And you did, I think yours were a little bit more extreme than I was, even to eat a pizza and have a huge smoothie is just crazy, but it's always
so, I mean, the part that I want people to understand there is it's not all fun and games when you have to eat like that. And it is dedication. And so whenever I basically trained my body to say, hey, you're going to be between 290 and 335 pounds. I really hurt my metabolism too, because I was eating foods that weren't great foods for me, right? I mean, if I wasn't eating chicken and broccoli and brown rice, it was anything and everything I could get out of the cafeteria that would keep my weight up. And so when I was cut from the NFL, it took some serious dedication to get from, that 40 or 50 pounds dropped pretty quickly. And I know that sounds a lot to people, but when you're 330, just dropping 35 pounds, you're still 300 pounds. So I got down to 300 and then 290 and 280 pretty quick. But from 280 to 220, that was a game changer, man. I had to wake up at 3 a.m. and go to the gym every single day. And I would drive an hour to my job, and I would go to my job. I'd make 265 cold calls during the day. I'd get back in my car and drive an hour back to the campus, and I'd go to school from 5 to 9 every single night. And I spent 12 hours in the library just keeping up with my homework and the work for my master's program. And that was every single day for 6 months straight. And I lost 120 pounds that way. But like, I always knew in the back of my head that, like, I don't have to do this forever. I can make this kind of a temporary thing. And so that's what kept me going, right? Is like just trying to figure out how to do something for a certain amount of time. And then the motivation is the best motivator in life is achieving. So when you see the weight falling off, or you see, the changes that are happening in your mind and the way that you're feeling about yourself and about other people and the way that you see the world, that's really, really inspiring. Motivation turns to inspiration. And when that happens, that's when you can really, really start to take the next step in life. And for me, that really happened, in a matter of 6 months. So I mentioned that I was cut from the NFL. I had to go get a full-time job making 265 cold calls. I lost 120 pounds. I was no longer an athlete. I made my car the classroom on wheels. And when I did that, I did that for 6 months. When I was getting ready to graduate my master's program, my father passed away from an addiction to drugs and alcohol. So in a matter of 6 months, I went from, the top of the top, like, cream of the crop, to, oh my gosh, who the heck am I? I got to rebuild this guy. I got to figure out who I am. What's inside? Who do I want to be? What does that look like? And go figure that out. And when I hit rock bottom, man, is the day that I said, okay, you can't really go any farther from this. So what do you want to do? How do you want to build this? And that's when I started to understand that what I put in my mind and the actions I took would actually create the results I was looking for. So yes, it was a difficult 6 months. It was a disciplined 6 months, but also I manifested. I had an idea, I took action, and then I manifested things, right? And so what's the crazy thing and the great thing about being a human being is we are spiritual beings, but we're also physical. So what you put into your mind and the actions that you take will actually create results. And I think that's a part of people understanding or misunderstanding the law of attraction. Think it and it will come. No, I mean, that's the first step. Think about it. But then those thoughts have to turn into your actions, and those actions then turn into your results. So yes, the law of attraction works if you work the law of attraction. And that was like a big light switch for me, coming from a small city, and just not having that growth mindset that I did until I started reading those books. Once I did, I was like, man, what can't I do? With the right plan and with the right discipline. So anyways, I know I just went on a little bit of a rant there, but that was just a little bit about, that 6 months. Like, I made it my living. It sounds like the living hell to a lot of people, but that 6 months in my life made me the person I am today. And it gave me the confidence that, hey, if everything is stripped away from me today and I have to start back from zero, guess what? I've already been there. I can do it again. And I'm already light years ahead of where I was when I did it before.
Yeah. Some of the toughest times are not some of the best times, but they build your character, and sometimes they actually are. And I'm not saying losing your father, I'm sorry that happened to you, for sure, was not the best times, but that grind and stuff like that, I'm sure you look back at that with actually some satisfaction and some fondness. Oh, yeah. I remember some of the hardest times, like in training and stuff like that, in terms of wrestling and stuff like that. Going in every morning and training and getting killed and just being bruised and battered and not seeing a light. You want to make it on TV. You want to be wrestling all these people, and you're getting bruised and battered every day, and you feel like you're making no progress. But looking back at that time now, I think as bad as it seemed at the time, it's one of my fondest memories actually in life. That time was actually really cool. Like, we were going to war every day, like training our asses off and putting everything on the line, and it's actually kind of cool. It builds, and just like you said, it builds that character, builds you who you are as a person, right? And sometimes, and it just goes to show some of the hardest times you can have actually, maybe not the best, but they build the best character out of you. And I think that's really
I think that to just piggyback on that thought, man, I mean, when you go through something like that and you put yourself through that, it really shows you your own true colors. And so you get to see who you are. And if you don't like what you're made of, you get a choice to change it. And that's the exciting thing in life. I read a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And Paulo wrote The Alchemist. And basically the mantra of the book is the journey is the goal. And I know that's kind of a dichotomy, but it really is. So if that's the truth, then in life, the end goal of life is to enjoy the journey, because there is no end to this. There is an end. We're going to die. That's been proven. Whatever your beliefs are afterwards. But if you're going to have this journey, I think it's all up to us to architect the best journey that we possibly can. And a big piece of that is looking inside of yourself and figuring out who you are, what you don't like, what you can change, and what you can't, and figure out how to do that. And once you can do that, you start to enjoy that journey, and then life just becomes your own playground.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it really is, right? Because whatever goals we have, right, whatever it is, right, to achieve, and we're all trying to achieve some goals. I think most people listening to this will have some kind of goals in some form or fashion. But what happens once you reach that goal, right? Once you reach that goal, is life just suddenly all of a sudden 10 times better? No, like you said, a lot of times it's almost better trying to achieve those goals, because that's why people then set new goals, right? And you always want to, I heard someone say this the other day, you want to almost set goals that you can achieve, because then when you achieve it, what happens with your life? Look at people who've gone to the moon, right? They struggle once they come back, because once you've been to the moon, what's next? What's after that, right? Yeah. What's bigger than going to the moon? You can't go to Mars yet, right? Maybe in the future, but once you've got to that point, so their training and everything leading up to going to the moon and achieving that was amazing. But after that, they struggled. And I think there's a lot to be said, like you said, about that journey. And I love that book, by the way, The Alchemist. Really, it's not like a direct mindset book or anything, but it was really cool. I really enjoyed that book.
Yeah. I'm glad you read that one, man. Not a lot of people have read that one.
Oh yeah, it's a cool. I made my wife even read it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but something that's apparent, and you've said it a few times now, is your work ethic, right? You said that when you were young, you were slinging beer, working in restaurants, cleaning floors, doing whatever. Like, where do you think that work ethic comes from? Because not everybody has it, right? It's one thing to say work hard or whatever, but it seems like it was ingrained into you.
Yeah, I watched my mom work 2 jobs, and what my mom really instilled in me was the value of the dollar. And so, and how important it was to value that. And the way that you made it was to go work for it. And frankly, I don't necessarily agree with having to work the same way and being paid for dollars anymore. I do agree with the work ethic mentality that she instilled with me. She worked nights, right? So she would work from 7 in the evening until 7 in the morning. She would sleep for 5 or 6 hours, and then she would go work at another job. Like, that's crazy, with 3 kids, And so just watching her do that, and the sacrifice that she made so that I could go to private schools and I could have, some certain things that I could, I would ask for, and those things, I will be always indebted to her in the way that she implemented her work ethic into, I think, myself and my sister. So that's where I probably saw it firsthand, man. And then I was so grateful and blessed to be at the organization that I was at when I started to work when I was 14. I baled hay, but I also worked at this, family-owned catering business. And those folks were the hardest working people I've ever seen in my life. To this day, they still work extremely hard. Weekends, nights, you name it. Manual labor. So those 2 kind of scenarios really opened my eyes to say, holy cow, like what I thought was hard before I saw this is not hard. So it was those 2 influences early on. 16, 17 years ago now.
Incredible. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Something you said as well, it just kind of struck a chord with me a little bit as well. You said you were a lot younger when you went through this, but you'd always identified as an athlete, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you didn't identify it with it anymore. I had a similar thing with wrestling. I wrestled for 12 years or something, maybe a little bit more. And then all of a sudden that came to an end. And I was like, I had to ask myself, who am I as a person? Because before that, I was a wrestler. I was going to be the world heavyweight champion. I was going to wrestle for the rest of my life. I was going to make a ton of money. Everything was going to be great. I was going to enjoy it. that's who I identified. That's who everyone knew me. They knew me as Barri the wrestler back with my hometown. Everyone kind of knew me as that. But then when that came to an end, and I realized like I had to ask myself some serious questions. Then who am I? What am I going to do next? Who am I as a person? Like I guess I'd be almost hiding, to be honest with you, behind who the Barri the wrestler, this wrestling caricature I'd created for myself. Right? I'd been hiding behind that because I was just riding this continual wave that kept going up and up, and then that wave came crashing down. What was it, that one moment of being cut that caused that identity crisis with you think, or was there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being cut was a big, it was a big wake up call. But when I was cut, I actually had a very freeing feeling. It was this feeling of, hey, you no longer have to be what others have imposed on you in your life. And it was conflicting because I thought I was going to go, make money being a football player. But then I was cut, but it also felt good. It felt good because it was exciting to me to figure out actually who I was. And so I looked at it as an opportunity and a journey. So so being cut was huge, but then also watching my father pass away the way that he did also was a life-changing experience because it showed me how fickle life can be and how short it truly is and how impactful the decisions that you make on a regular basis are in your life and how they result. So it was that 6 months, I think, that really opened the door for me to say, man, I got some changes to make. I got some self-reflection to do, and I got some action to take. I just didn't know what it exactly was at the time. So that 6 months back in 2021 almost now. So 2013 is really when, or 2014, sorry, is really when I started to kind of go back inside myself, I guess.
And those things that happen to you, a lot of people would have just rolled over and got in a ball and curled up and kind of let everything get the better of them, right? And they would have been kind of understandable because that's a lot to go through at that time, right? What do you think it was that made you sort of persevere, pick yourself back up? And I'm sure there was times when you maybe didn't. It wasn't an immediate thing, like everything happened, you're like, all right, I'm ready to go. I'm sure there was times where you didn't feel your best or whatever, but what do you think it was that got you to persevere through that, and not only persevere through it, but grow and become something even bigger and better?
Yeah, so I had some really great mentors growing up. Since my father wasn't necessarily the best father figure, so to speak, I had some friends, dads, that really played a big role in my life. And, growing up from kind of an interesting, I guess, background with my family dynamic and what I experienced, I always strove and was striving to create what I saw in those other families, meaning there was routine, there was order, there was love, there was patience, all of those things that my life didn't really have, that I always strove to have. And so my dad always used to tell me, and this was probably a false identity that I carried for a long time, but it's worked out and I still believe it. But he would look at me in the face and he would say, Logan, you can do and be whatever you want to be, but you have to set your mind to it. And I was like, the hell's that mean? I'm going to set my mind to it. Like, what? And so I don't know where he said or heard that or why he always told me that, but like I had this false sense of identity and maybe this belief in myself that no matter what I wanted to do, I could actually make happen. And, I also had those great mentors to kind of model my life after. And so those were two big reasons. But I think the third being, man, I dove back into my faith. If you're watching this video, you can see the Pope right there. You can see my crucifix over here. So I'm a big Catholic guy. And that gave me a really big sense of identity and purpose when I needed it the most. And so that was really, really important for me. So those three influences, and I made some good choices. I made some really bad ones too, but I made some really good choices and figured out that, if I can follow in the footsteps of successful people, then I probably can make my life somewhat similar to that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that, man. I know it's a real estate show, but I think this stuff is really important, and I think it's good to talk about it. I think we all go through stuff, right? And we all challenge ourselves sometimes when we're challenged, right? And it's like, where do you go with these challenges, right? How do you respond to them, right? Because we all face different challenges, but there's always challenges. Nobody doesn't go through life and doesn't face challenges. Yep. How we respond to them, how we figure out how to do stuff is what makes us and impacts us. And I think it's always good to hear people's stories and how they're able to do that. I think because, yes, the real estate is always the real estate, right? Okay, it's good to understand it. You want to understand the mechanics of, underwriting, everything, everything that goes into a deal. But this I think the mindset's word is, again, I feel like it's overused, right? It's like conservative underwriting is overused. Right?
It's like COVID pricing, right?
Right. But it really is stuff that makes or breaks us, I think, and I appreciate you sharing that story.
Of course.
I'm sure it's never easy to kind of repeat some of those stuff that you had to go through. But now obviously you are in multifamily, you're in real estate. Is that where you started? How did you start in real estate? How did that thing start for you?
So I was fired from my job a little over three years ago now. Well, yeah, a little over 3 years. I guess upcoming in January December will be my fourth full year in real estate. So when I was fired, my wife, I called her, I said, hey, I got fired. And she's like, hey, no worries. Just check your email whenever you get home. And I was like, what? What do you mean check my email? Okay. So I checked my email. She had already started the articles of organization and the LLC agreement for my company, Live Free Investments. And so having the support of her was so important for me from day one. And so I started as a head of acquisitions for a $50 million fund here in Kansas City. My buddy landed this fund off of Bigger Pockets. And so he had this boutique firm that was kind of buying, renovating, and renting these properties out and then managing for folks. And so I represented this fund on the single family home side. I also had a full-time sales consulting job that I was working, but the real estate 6 months in took off so fast. I was doing 10 or 12, transactions a month. I ended up doing like 120 transactions in 10 months. So that's how I got started into real estate. When I sat down with those sponsors, we went through a big Corvest portfolio refinance. We're about the sixth group in the country to do that. Basically we returned the capital to those investors and it was still cash flowing. And I sat down with the sponsors of that fund and I said, hey guys, can you walk me through like where this money come from? Was it yours? Where did it, where'd you get it? And that was when they said, hey, this was a syndication. I had not heard that word before. And so that turned me on to all of the resources around, syndication, you name it, the big guys, Joe Fairless, the real estate guys, Michael Blanc, all of those guys, and started to really do some research. I was like, okay, I think this is where I'm going to focus my time. I took that idea to that single family home broker and he's like, no, I don't do multifamily. You're going to be playing with the big dogs and you're going to get crushed. And I said, perfect. When somebody in my life tells me, no, it's not a good idea, you can't do that, that means that they can't imagine themselves doing that. Mm-hmm. It's the David Goggins mentality, right? It's like, what if? But what if I could? Would it be better? And that my what if was like, well, what if I could create a syndication business? What if I could, create this whole ecosystem of investors? What if I could, have 1,000 units in a year? What if I could do that stuff? And so I left that firm. He's a great mentor to me, but I left that firm, moved my real estate license because I'm a licensed broker here in Kansas City as well, to a commercial and multifamily brokerage. Ended up buying a couple properties myself because I wanted to learn the process first. And then I ran out of money. So I started figuring out, okay, now I got to raise some money. How the heck do I do that? And started learning about all the ways to do that legally and started putting deals together, man. And that was a little over, 15 or 16 months ago now. And we're close to, by the end of the year, we'll probably be about 800 units or so and be 1,000 by the first quarter. So that's kind of the transgression into the real estate world.
That's interesting. So that first company you worked for, they would just set up how would that work for them? They would buy a ton of houses as a portfolio. They would buy them individually. And would it be a blind fund? How did all that work? Just out of interest.
Yeah. So I was the head of acquisitions and when I could find portfolios, I would, but they had very specific criteria. They had to be in school districts that were rated by betterschools.org, 5 or better. So that really narrowed in the focus. They also would not buy anything that was under 3 bedrooms. It also needed to have a garage, and they really preferred it to have a basement. And so I had to be in certain areas, certain criteria, and I had to be able to hit a certain ratio that we were utilizing on purchasing them. So it wasn't a blind pool fund per se, but it was a fund that the money was raised already that had a specific use. And so the sponsors got to decide which deals they did and didn't. But I had to get really good at, negotiating contracts, because I had to figure out, okay, we're going to buy this cash. We're going to buy it in 7 days, no inspections, but I got to be able to estimate rehab, not miss big things on these deals. And then I got to be able to convince them to sell it to me 25 to 35, maybe 40% below what they're asking. Now that is the challenge, and that was a challenge that I took head on. So that's how that fund was set up. We would go buy it. Typically these were not occupied houses. We would buy the house, we'd renovate the house, we'd rent it out, and then we would go refinance the whole thing.
Wow. That's pretty cool. So, and then with the refinance, the aim would be to pull out all the money out again, or not?
Yeah, they were able to pull out about 88% of their capital and return that to their investors.
Well, and then the investors would stay in the deal, or they would move those investors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stayed in the deal. Now, I think the economics changed at that point, but I don't know exactly what it was. They didn't give me all the particulars for it, but they were super successful. This is the third market that they had done this in.
That's interesting. That's an interesting model, because that's a lot of deals you have to go through, right? If you're racing.
Yeah. You got to have a hustler finding those deals.
Yeah, well, they had you, so they were lucky, I think. But how were you? Was it MLS? Was it wholesalers? Was it direct?
It was all of them, and it was also utilizing Craigslist. I was also networking with property managers. You name it, man. I mean, I was doing everything that I possibly could. I would also look at, I'd say, about 20 or 25 houses a week. So I was out there, walking these houses a lot too. It's funny because I did about 100 and 120 transactions. I can't remember exactly how many I did. And the volume for those deals was right around $13 million in volume. This year, I'll do 14 deals and $47 million in volume. So I was like, you know what? I need to not be doing what I was doing. I mean, I was working on 10 or 12 a month back then, and I'm, and doing 1/3 or 1/4 of the volume. So I'm really happy that I'm in the right space now.
Yeah, it's like the same amount of work for one house as it is for them, almost, right? Not quite, but
yeah,
close, right, for a large apartment complex.
Absolutely, man.
But so what did your week look? Were you doing everything? Were you doing from talking to property managers, agents, wholesalers, Craigslist, all that stuff in finding deals? Were you then underwriting them then and analyzing those deals as well?
I analyzed over 450 properties that year.
Wow. So
estimating the rehab, negotiating on them. We probably made offers on about, 85% of them. So, I mean, it was probably 350 offers we put out that year.
Wow. To get 120. So what is that ratio? Are you looking at 30 to get one, something like that?
Yeah, basically. Wow. Yeah. I would say that I got it down to about between 15 and 20 at the end. But at the beginning, I was so new that I was just looking at everything that I possibly could. But then I started to really hone in that, that one's probably not going to work. But I got better as the process went along.
Did you have a quick, sorry not to focus in on this too much, but it's really interesting to me. Would you have a quick down and dirty, because you can't be analyzing all these properties down to the granular level, right? Do you have a quick down and dirty analysis for all these? It's like a 1% or something like that?
Yeah, man. So I built my own pro forma because I needed to understand the metrics. And so if I had a pro forma that if I was able to put in the purchase price, the estimated rehab, the Zillow estimate, the rent in the area, I could calculate taxes, insurance, and where the price would actually need to be. So what I would do is I would underwrite all of these. I had a pro forma that spit out kind of some basic numbers, and then I would send that over to the fund, and then the fund would do their own analysis. I don't know exactly what they did, but basically looking at school districts, making sure the location was good, what they liked about it, and and we were off to the races. So, I mean, you absolutely needed to be above the 1% on the price to rent ratio.
Interesting. And then you were negotiating as well. So I'm guessing you learned some really good negotiating skills.
Yeah, I did, man. I learned that deals get done because of relationships. And so it was really important for me not to just send blind offers out. I'd make sure I would call them and say, hey, just so you know, it might seem like we're going to be really greedy on this thing, but let me tell you about our model, right? So I'd use some of that Chris Voss in Never Split the Difference. It probably seems like, it might sound like, I did an accusation audit before I even sent the offer, right? So I was kind of thinking through what objections they were going to have, and then I would at least give them some sort of rationale for those. I would call them, and if I couldn't call them, I'd probably send them a text or leave them a voicemail, and then I'd send the offer on to make sure that they understood what was coming and why it was. And then we also had, we had a bank letter with $14 million of cash sitting in that bank account. So I would send them that as well. But I started to build relationships with property managers and with folks that were representing these other investors. So there was larger scale investors that would buy, they would do all those yellow letter campaigns. And what happened, Barry, is they would get backed up on their general contracting. So they couldn't get those houses done in time. So they'd send me a list and say, hey, here's the 15 houses we have right now. Here's the ones that are in work, and here's the ones that haven't got started yet. I'd say, hey, mark up the ones that haven't got started yet. Let me buy those from you in a bulk manner before you allow, you take those out to market. And if they didn't have any crews to get started on the deal, that worked. So it really was just trying to solve problems for them. Listen to them, see what's going on, and try to solve some problems. So, that's kind of what I was implementing. And but don't get me wrong, it was a lot of work. I'll tell you that much. I don't miss going in my car in my little Chevy Malibu and driving across the city every single day, mucking through the snow and the rain and all that good stuff. But, that's what it takes. You got to get your hands dirty. And that's, again, why I was successful, because I'd show up at a house and, I started buying the same area. So these agents would really, they'd see my Malibu pull up and they'd be like, oh man. And they'd be leaving with, an owner occupant client. And, you got to believe, you got to know these things were $100,000 to $160,000 houses, right? So they'd be leaving and they'd be like, will you at least allow us to get an offer in first? And it was just funny because, I kind of got a name in the market for being quick to the punch and getting offers in really, really quickly. So, but Kansas City, you can't do that anymore. It's so hot. The affordability crisis is going strong. You can't find a house that will, be for the 1% rule. If you're trying to do it, going at 70% ARV and then, minus out your rehab costs, it's just not going to happen here in Kansas City, especially in good areas, because so many owner occupants are just bidding these things up because they're getting, they're wanting to live in homes now. So anyways, we hit it while we could and we did it the right way.
Yeah. Is that because of COVID? The prices are going on, or is it just because Kansas City is a hot market? Was this happening before COVID hit? Because I know in Vegas, for example, prices have just skyrocketed because there's low interest rates. So there's more buyers than there are sellers. So prices have just been jacked up. Is it similar to that in Kansas City?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? So, obviously the debt's cheap. People are working from home now, and that's really, really important. But also, I think that some millennials are just getting older. And so they're just, people in the Midwest like to own houses. It's just not necessarily like Kansas City's a big spread out city. Yeah, we have 2.5 million people here in the MSA, but it's spread out across a big, big chunk. And a lot of those are single family homes. So I think it's more or less just the mentality around the folks here. And then every new house that's being built, Barry, hard to build houses that are under $300,000. And in Kansas City, $300,000 is a pretty expensive house. It's not cheap. And so, when you have something that's between $150,000 and $225,000 that's in a good school district, people are just, all over that to try to go grab it.
Yeah, interesting. But now obviously you're in the multifamily space, right? And so what is the state of the Kansas City multifamily space right now? I always hear about Kansas City being, it's turned a lot, right? Maybe a few years ago, it wasn't such a well-known, but it seems like a lot of people are investing in Kansas City now. Well, why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. You continue to see Kansas City perform well on rent growth. So Kansas City Yardi just put out their report for their Q3 multifamily report, or maybe it was their annual report actually. But the top 5 markets, one was like Sacramento, Inland Empire, which I think is in California. It's a really interesting name. You got Charlotte up there. I think there's one other, North Carolina, or maybe it was Austin, and then Kansas City. And it's because the diverse economy, man. Not one sector of our economy makes up more than 15%. And so you're seeing investor migration here. You're seeing tech migration because people can work from home. And so Kansas City's got this little Silicon Prairie feel to it. Google Fiber is here. There's a lot of incubators. Sprint had a big accelerator here. So there's some cool things happening around the tech world. But then you have, the most, rail tonnage in the country in Kansas City as well. So those bread and butter type of jobs like manufacturing and, you got the railroad, you've got the river here that are bringing things in and out, people moving things. You got construction, we have engineering. I mean, there's farming. I mean, there's so many different, and then you have companies like Garmin and H&R Block and Honeywell and all these, and Cerner, which is a big healthcare IT company, all headquartered here in Kansas City. And then you've got some of the best affordability in the country. So the median average rent to income ratio in Kansas City is one of the best in the country. So meaning people now can get a good job. They can make $75,000 to $100,000, and they're not paying more than 25%, probably closer to 20% of their income on rent. So they're able to invest for their future. So I think all of those things combined with kind of the hotspot of the Chiefs and the Royals back in the day, whenever they were actually pretty good. We got a cool barbecue scene here. All these things are kind of creating some buzz in Kansas City.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't have had you say that now, because he's going to attract more investors. Anyone who's watching this is going to be attracted to
Well, no, it's okay. Just reach out to me and you can invest in our deals. No big deal.
There we go. Yeah, rather than having to find the deals yourself, you guys can work with Logan.
That's right.
You said that you wanted to do some deals first. What was your first couple of deals that you did by yourself? What size were them? What was the story on those?
Yeah, so the first deal was a mixed use asset. So it was in one of my favorite areas of town, still is. It was a bagel shop on the main level, and then it had 2 Airbnb, so 2 short-term rentals on top. I don't know, it was about $550,000, I think. I bought that thing somewhere around an 8% cap rate. But like what I had to do was solve for the operations of that, right? So this was when there wasn't all of these short-term rental, management companies. So I had to find somebody that could manage this thing. How do we do that? I had to re-sign a lease with the bagel shop because, the guy who put them in there developed that building and just put them in there just to get some rent, and they were way below. So I had to jack that up, and so that was my first deal, solely deal. And then I went out and bought a 12,000 square foot commercial building that was a redevelopment project in one of the hottest areas of Kansas City. I was direct to the seller. She was an 85-year-old lady. Judy Skates, she's no longer with us. She literally passed away like 6 months after the transaction. So I hope that it wasn't because she sold me her building, but she also, I never saw her without a cigarette in her mouth either. So, I don't think that helped her out too much too. And, that was a $775,000 deal. So those were my 2 first deals. And then my first 2 syndications that I did, I actually purchased 2 bed and breakfast hotels. Believe it or not. So never raised $1 to my name and had no experience, nothing. I decided to put 2 hotels under contract on the Kansas City Plaza, the Country Club Plaza, which is one of the nicest areas in the city. And I kind of put myself to the fire and said, oh, well, now you got to go raise $2 million. Good luck, buddy. And I figured it out. We own those hotels today. And obviously before COVID, they were doing fantastic. But, now that COVID is here, obviously the hospitality space has been hit a little bit. But those were the first 4 deals that I did.
Wow. So why hotels? Why did you go after those hotels? Because I think when you learned about syndication originally, right, it was about multifamily, right, rather than.
Yep.
So why go after those hotels?
I have an undergrad in hotel and restaurant management. So I had worked in restaurants and stuff growing up. The brokerage that I was working at, their COO just came over from Marriott. So I felt like some of the operational piece would be taken care of. And I just felt like the real estate alone was worth more than what we had it under contract for. And we were also buying a business. And so the short-term rental market in that area is just so hot. There, the hotel rooms are so expensive on the plaza. And I really just fell in love with those two properties. And the unique aspects to add value through the business operations. So they just kind of came to me, just like by happenstance. We put one of them under contract, and then during our due diligence phase, we found the other one and put it under contract as well. So, it was just like we weren't going to do both of them. We weren't going to do any of them. But then they brought it to us, and we're like, oh, man, that's interesting. And then we found another one. It was like, well, if we're going to do one, why not do two? And I had never raised a dollar to my name. And I think that gave me I don't have too many gray hairs, but I'm pretty sure I got some gray hairs because of that. But I learned a lot.
For anyone watching, Logan has some great hair, by the way. You got to
Thank you.
He's got great hair. Yeah, he's very well groomed. So you're styling and profiling, that's for sure.
I appreciate that.
How many hotel rooms were there between the both of them?
Yeah, so one of them is a 20-unit big. It's like a big mansion. So old houses that have been converted into bed and breakfast hotels. And the other one, that one is 17. That's called the Southmoreland. And then the other one is 9. So I think we have about total 25 or 26 units between the two.
Wow. So I was speaking to someone about, I'm not that familiar with the hotel space. Was that valued on, is it RevPAR? Is that correct? Is that what they?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
The other day. So
yeah.
For someone who doesn't understand, how does that work? Right? Because most people understand a cap rate, right? It's valued on a cap rate, it's the NOI divided by cap rate. But how are hotels valued?
So we still have an NOI, right? But you have to realize that there's an operations piece. So instead of a property management company, you're typically going to have staff. And so when you have staff, you have to realize that there's going to be turnover, right? And so turnover is another calculation that you have to have kind of calculated in. But also, your operational expenses are going to be much higher on something like this because you're not looking for a tenant every single 12 months. You're looking for a tenant every single night or every 3 nights, right? And so there's a capacity of marketing that I love about this because I can really get, strategic about the businesses and the way that we go about marketing these properties because most of the travelers that were coming to these properties fell in love with the area. They fell in love. We sell art out of the hotels. So they fell in love with the ability to see art and have a breakfast and something a little bit more intimate. But they also fell in love with the staff, the people, the familiarity of that, and just the feeling that you get much more high touch, right? So a lot of businesses would bring their VIPs in and stay at these hotels instead of, the Marriott or something like that. So, when you're thinking about the operations, you have to, that there's going to be big cleaning costs. We have linen cost. We have staff. We have cleaning of not just the rooms, but we have the common areas. We have the kitchen. We have to cook food. So it was just more or less looking at it from a business perspective, understanding the value of the business, and then creating an NOI that we felt comfortable with trying to achieve that too. And so getting a loan for that deal was very unique because, it was frankly, you have to find the right bank that feels good about, loaning on a bed and breakfast hotel. Thankfully, the loan that they had with that on that property was with the relationship I already had here at a community bank. So we were able to step in and kind of get them to re-up the loan. It was more or less just like thinking about how can we do better job managing the property. It was mom and pop that had lived in the property. So we felt like there was some things that we could spruce up. We could make a little cleaner, make a little tighter, and, figure out how to make it operate a little bit more efficiently with some marketing as well. And we were doing that until, March of this year. So, but just to reiterate the fact, you still looked at it like, we still looked at it from an operation, like an income standpoint. Then you have your operating expenses. So you get your NOI. We didn't really apply a cap rate to that NOI though, necessarily. We kind of applied like a risk rate to it. So which I guess is a cap rate in some capacity, but you also have to think about, okay, well, these people were operating this in their own names, really. I mean, and they were kind of the innkeepers. And so we have to add new costs into this because we are not going to live in the property. So it was a little bit different, but it wasn't anything that was crazy out of the ordinary. I got an awesome financial statement from them showing me all of their, expenses. So I was able to extrapolate that and see where, use our chief operating officers, knowledge and intelligence and experience to say, hey, help me build a budget, and where are they off? Where's our opportunities? And that's where we felt really comfortable with it.
That's pretty cool. And you said we as a team. Who was part of your team? Just you and your wife at that point, or did you have other team members?
Yeah, so I actually teamed up with the principals at the brokerage that I was working at. Okay. So yeah, they actually came on because I didn't have the balance sheet to get the deal done. I didn't have any of that. So frankly, I needed some help from that side of things. And so the two principals at the brokerage that I still work at came on board with me on that deal.
Okay. And then you said you raised $2 million. You hadn't raised a dollar up to that point, not a single dollar, right? And then you had $1 million raise. So, yeah. Talk us about through that. That mindset shift you must have had to have, right? Because it's, $2 million is not, you were working with a big company before that, but when it's you and it's money that you have to create and be involved with, it's a totally different thing, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a great list of single family home investors. And so I had all this false confidence that it said, hey, I'm pretty sure that I can get these guys to see, they're interested in real estate. So because they're interested in single family homes and multifamily homes, they'll probably be interested in a bed and breakfast hotel. It wasn't the case. So frankly, I had to stop everything that I was doing for 2-3 months full and just talk to everybody I knew about investing in a bed and breakfast hotel. I think it took about 1,000 or 1,100 touches. I was kind of tracking these things. And so I don't miss, having to do that. But again, it's another one of those things in my life that like really showed me that if I just stick my nose into it and I can put my head down and just get to work. I try not to work that hard on those things anymore. Try to work much smarter. So frankly, Barry, I don't really have a good answer other than the fact that I stopped everything else and just did that.
But it's another one of those things, like you said, like once you learn how to do that, right? If everything else is taken away from you now, right? Mm-hmm. Hopefully that never, ever, ever happens. But you can go back to that skill. That's a skill that you've learned, that you mastered, that you conquered at that time.
That's right.
It gives you that belief that if tomorrow you needed to start over again, you can do it. So I think that's phenomenal. But how does that conversation go though, right? So it's, you're starting out, you have a reputation, I'm sure, and you had a track record, but it was in single family homes and, had the knowledge and a base, but it's owning a hotel and running a hotel and having that piece is something different. How did that conversation go with a lot of people?
Yeah. I mean, what I tried to do was I tried to think through the questions and the objections that they would have before I had those conversations. So that being said, when you think about boutique bed and breakfast hotel, you have to think through, hey, how are you going to compete against all the other hotel rooms in Kansas City? How are you going to solve for the operational piece? What type of debt are you going to put on this? What's the value add? Can you show me experience on construction? All of those different things. And I said, yeah, well, let me break these down for you. So I came up to the conclusion to say, hey, I'm not sure if this is for you, but I've got a really interesting opportunity here. It's a real estate play and a business play. And let me tell you a little bit about it. So that's how I set that call and that conversation up. And then I would start with the operational experience that the team that I was bringing on board had and where the opportunity I felt like was. And then once they started asking questions, I had already mentally thought through most of those questions and was able to kind of answer them in a clear and concise and compelling way. And that's what led me to I probably didn't start doing that, Barry, until call 500. I was like, man, these are not working. What's going on? And then I started thinking through, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a light switch. I went back to my traditional sales days and was like, you got to map this out, man. put yourself in their shoes, think about what they're thinking about, and then try to address those from day one. And that's what I started to do. And when I did that, those conversations really started to be much more productive.
That's an insane amount of calls. And for one, where are you finding these people, right? To find, I don't think I could find 1,100 people if I tried, but where are you finding 1,100 people from?
Yeah, it was LinkedIn. It was Bigger Pockets. I would ask for referrals. I had my brokerage business, so I had a ton of leads from that as well. So I used the people that had reached out to me. I had built about a list of about 300 single-family home investors as well. Those people, loved me. They loved my work ethic. And I said, hey, again, I'm not sure if it's for you, but would you be open-minded to introducing me to somebody that might be interested in this? I mean, man, I just was one by one. I mean, and then everybody I knew in Kansas City, I would take a meeting like crazy and say, hey, let's go over there. Let's take a look at the property. I must have walked that thing probably 500 times to get that deal done. So it was a combination of all of those, but I had a little bit of a platform started already.
That's cool. That's cool. I love your can do and will do kind of attitude, right? You're just going to do whatever it took at that point to kind of make it.
That's right.
You weren't going to let that beat you. So you raised $2 million. What was, do you know how many investors were there? What was the minimum raise? 50, 25,000?
That one was $50,000 on the minimum. So, and we had some $250,000 investors in that deal. And so that was, I think we ended up having 10. Yeah, we had about 10 investors on both of those deals.
Okay. And then how does the hotel, how does a hotel investment compare to a multifamily? Do they have higher, lower returns? How do they compare? Are they similar?
Yeah, I mean, so the IRR on this, when we were selling this deal, was somewhere between 23 and 24%. But you also have to know that it's in one of the most desirable areas where, in the multifamily in that arena is selling for a 4.5% cap rate. So it was a very desirable location. And so that helped us out a ton. So I was able to point to kind of property values that were nearby. And there were single family homes that were nearby as well that sold for as much, or if not the same amount that we were purchasing the buildings at, which allowed me to say, hey, at the very least, if we just had to convert this to a single family home, we probably will get what we paid for it. So, mitigating risk that way. And we did similar, 8% preferred return, and then did a 70-30 split above that.
Interesting. So obviously that one was a great deal. And I'm sure until COVID, it was probably doing well. Why not stick to that model? Because then you went to the apartment, to buying apartment complexes.
Right.
Why
yeah, well, there's not an endless amount of bed and breakfast hotels, and I also wanted to prove the model out. I thought 2 was a good amount to say, hey, let's operate and manage these things for a year, 2 years, and then if we figure out that there's a recipe for success here, let's go duplicate that into other markets. And I actually made offers on bed and breakfast hotels in Wichita and down in Herman. So I made offers on other ones. We just didn't get them. But at the same time, when COVID happened, it was just like, yeah, let's stop, pushing the gas on the bed and breakfast hotel, and the apartments were really kind of booming at that time too.
Okay. So what was your first apartment syndication then?
Yeah. So we bought a 37-unit apartment complex this time last year. Funny story. I had a 1031 exchange brokerage client. I had not formalized my relationship with my business partners at this time. We were doing some projects together, but they called me on a Sunday and said, hey, we got this deal under contract. I was like, oh, cool. What is it? And they told me. I said, guys, I was the other party bidding it up. And so they ended up beating me out, which was fine. But it was a 37-unit apartment complex. The raise was $775. I still remember it. And it was developed using LIHTC credits, so low-income housing tax credits. And the land use restriction burned off this year. And so this year, December, it burns off. So meaning we get to take those restricted rents back to market if we want to. And so it's in an area that we absolutely love. I love the property. We own 5 other assets already over there now, which is great. And so the value add on that one was there was an ability to add 2 units. So we're in the middle of building out 2 more units on that deal. Additionally, The land use restriction is lifted in December of this year, but you had to get accepted or approved by the MHDC, the Missouri Housing Development Committee, to actually purchase the property. So one of my business partners has about 12 years worth of LIHTC development experience. So that allowed us to kind of get in at a 9% cap rate on this deal. And we're already getting ready to go out in the first or second quarter of next year, look at a refinance for our investors.
Wow. Okay. That's great. But then, so what was the purchase price on that 37 unit like that?
It was $2.1 million.
How much, sorry?
About $2.1 million.
Okay. So having done a few syndications now, you find that the smaller deals is kind of, does it make it tighter? Because obviously the PPM for the most part is going to cost the same, right? The private placement memorandum.
Oh yeah.
On a 200 unit or a 37 unit, right? I'm sure there's not a huge difference in price. Was that a challenge?
No, there's not.
Costs that associated with a syndication on a smaller deal like that?
Yeah, I haven't had too big of an issue with that. We have an in-house or quasi in-house SEC attorney now that we're working so much. So my costs on them are about probably a third or a fourth of what people's are typically, but we're doing one of these every 2 months now. So I mean, it takes somebody that has volume to be able to get that type of scale and pricing on those. So, I mean, I think it was in between $5,000 and $7,000 for that deal. And we just completed one that was a $22 million deal. And it was also $5,000 or $7,000, but you just bake it in, you have to understand what those costs are.
Yeah. So is that $22 million deal the biggest one you've done so far?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we raised $7.5 million for that transaction. We just closed on it last month, so we're very excited about that. And I think right before we jumped on, I mentioned that I have another 171 units in that same submarket. What I love about that submarket is there's a rent desert. The last 9 years, there has not been there's only been 5 units developed in the 5-mile radius in the last 9 years in that area, and no new deals completed for under construction. So I love the fact that there's a nice little rent desert over there, and we'll have close to 600 units in that submarket alone will really give us a feel for where we can take those rents.
How many units do you get for $22 million? What size deal was that?
426.
Okay. What is that per unit?
It was about 50. I think it was $55,000 or $54,000 a unit, if I can remember right.
Okay, I have a calculator here. I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Anyone who could work that out at the top of the head before us gets bonus points.
There you go.
How many units was it?
It was $21,750,000.
Okay.
And we divide that by 426, $51,000 a door.
Okay, $51,000 a door. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that what the
average rents are? Probably $625 to $650.
Okay. And then, so what's the story on that property? You guys are looking to improve the property, increase the rents?
We picked it up from a REIT that had already implemented the business plan over the last 5 years. So they had implemented it on 76% of the units had been renovated and proven out on the on the rent model. So we're just going to continue to do that. And over the last 4 or 5 years, those rents have gone up 3.5% annually in Independence. So we've got about 24% or so of the units that still need to be renovated. We're adding some amenities. We have a large Hispanic population over there, and they love to play soccer, man, just like people from the UK. So we're adding a soccer field. We're cleaning up the pool, figuring out some of the parking lot situations, and then we're going to finish up the cosmetic rehabs internally. And just, it's probably about a 5-year hold, I'd say, for us.
Okay. And then have you guys started the raise for that yet? You said 7.
Oh, it's done. Done. Closed.
Wow. So you guys are at that point now where 7.5 isn't that big a deal, or was it? How are you guys raising money now? Do you have a team that does that? Are you still doing it yourself?
Still doing it myself, man. Still doing it myself. Yeah. $100,000 at a time.
So the minimum now, you're at that point, you can $100,000 minimum?
That's what I always tell people.
So if they come in a little, you might let them in if they come in a little lower.
Yeah. Well, we won't say that on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's you talked about the $2 million you raised initially, and that you learned that skill, but I'm sure you've developed it, right? To this point, how are you raising money now? You think how are you doing it? Because still $7.5 million is $7.5 million, right? Whatever way you twist it, that's a lot of money to be raised.
Yeah, so utilizing just about every avenue that we possibly can. So I write over at Bigger Pockets. I write on our FTW website on a weekly basis. I have my podcast. I'm probably on 3 or 4 shows a week. I post on LinkedIn 3 or 4 times. I have over 11,000 followers, I think, over there on LinkedIn now. I'm on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter. I have a social media manager that's on Twitter. I have relationships with co-GPs that come in and sign on the balance sheet, and they might bring some folks into the deal as well. Really just one that we've done that for, but the check sizes have gotten larger. That's been the key. So it's been the fact that we went from $25,000 checks to, we just received our first $1 million wire the other day for this 426. So I think that it just, it's a natural progression, but I feel like I'm a marketing firm. I'm a marketing firm and a real estate operations firm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love that. That's a serious race. So congratulations, man, on that deal, and congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Really cool. Well, as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, right? I warned you before that I like to ask some wrestling-related real estate questions.
You bet.
The first one always catches everyone out, but might not for you, is what would your wrestling name be? If you were to pick a wrestling name for yourself, what would it be?
I'd be Shrek. I got the nickname Shrek back in college because my hands are so big. This is my head. That's my hand. I got a big old noggin. I got these hands that are massive. So one of my defensive linemen looked at me. He just called me Shrek one day. And I said, why are you calling me Shrek? He goes, look at your hands, man. And so I would be Shrek, and I would paint myself green every single time.
That's awesome. Your hands are massive. I can tell, even though I've never met you. You probably never had trouble catching a ball, huh?
Never.
Yeah.
No.
Well, every wrestler has a special move or a signature move, right? And once that happens, the match is over. So what is your special move in real estate, you think?
Man, it has to be just my discipline and the ability to figure out what the goal is, set an action plan, and then stick to it. Cut out all the noise and just go for it. I wouldn't have been able to raise for that 426 and doing another 235 by January if I didn't have a strategic plan, good operational partners, and the ability just to stay disciplined on it. So that's got to be my secret sauce, and my special move would just be that taking extreme action and discipline is so focused for me.
Awesome. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career?
Yeah. The biggest taken. Everything that I touched was gold, and so we didn't get a chance to really talk about it, but I mean, I've had an opportunity or a challenge in my career. That 12,000 square foot building I told you about earlier. I really tried to do everything on that deal. And when I tried to do everything, it really turned into being, I was the big bottleneck on it. I was trying to do too much. And so my body slam was having to write a $200,000 check to that investor earlier this year and say, hey, I gotta make this right, but I need out of this deal. And this is the way I'm going to do it.
Oh yeah. That is a rough one, but sometimes that's what happens, right?
That's right.
Yeah. You can't win them all. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Man, I would have to say that it would just be, when I was fired, I was not afraid to go out on my own, but I was afraid to take the full jump into real estate. So I started that sales consulting firm, which was ultimately profitable, but it also distracted me. And so it distracted me from my full potential. I lost 6 months of my life that doing that sales consulting thing that I probably could have been focused on building my platform, going after multifamily deals. And as this year has shown, 6 months and 500 units later, I might be 500 units above where I am now if I wouldn't have been distracted and gone full full cycle into it. So I think it was just more or less just being not completely sold on my real estate dreams. I am now, but that was definitely the one thing I would say.
Yeah, it's understandable though, going from being, having nothing almost at that point, right? Just like getting let go or whatever. So
yeah.
Well, Logan, man, this has been such a fun one, man. I really enjoy this. It's nice to have like a fellow jock on here, right?
Yeah, it was absolutely great to be on here, Barry. Thank you for having me, man.
We talk about weights and protein shakes and about
yeah.
a lot of the other stuff as well. Really good. Thanks for sharing everything and being so honest about it. But obviously, before we go, plug whatever you have, and as well on top of that, how can people get in touch with you if they want to be involved in any of your deals, if they just want to speak to you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Barry. You can head over to LinkedIn and search my name, Logan Freeman. But my website is ftwinvestmentsllc.com. You can just, find me on there as well. I'd be happy to chat. I appreciate that.
What about what's the name of your podcast?
It's the Live Free Investors Podcast.
You guys check that out. Give them a 5-star rating, right? A great
yeah.
We would appreciate that. Reach out to him. He's doing big things and doing great deals. So I'm sure you'd love to hear from all of you. Well, Logan, thank you so much, man, for making the time. I really appreciate it, man. This has been a real fun one. Enjoy the rest of your day there in Kansas, and hopefully we'll be able to meet up in person at some point somewhere.
I'd love that, man. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.